The alarm didn't go off. Scarlett Martinez opened her eyes at exactly 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before the alarm that should have sounded but remained silent on her cracked phone screen. Rain hammered against the window of the one-bedroom apartment she shared with 2 college roommates, and the smell of mold rose from the carpet, soaked by the leak their landlord had promised to fix 6 months ago. "Damn," she muttered, jumping out of bed as she realized water had spread across the floor during the night, completely soaking the cafe uniform she'd left drying on the makeshift clothesline. At 5:15, wearing her second option, a yellowed white blouse and black skirt with a small tear in the seam she disguised with a safety pin, Scarlett ran through the rain to the bus stop. The first bus broke down halfway there. The second was packed like a sardine can, and she found herself squeezed between a man who smelled like garlic and a woman talking loudly on the phone about marital problems. When she finally arrived at Sunrise Cafe at 6:35, she was 15 minutes late, soaked, and with her blonde hair stuck to her face like wet spaghetti. "Martinez, you're late again," shouted Tony, the 50-year-old manager with a prominent belly who always seemed irritated with life. "That's the 3rd time this month." "Sorry, Tony, the bus broke down and I don't want to hear excuses. A customer already complained that there's no one to serve her." He pointed to a corner table where an elegant woman with brown hair was tapping her foot impatiently, checking an expensive watch on her wrist. Scarlett took a deep breath, quickly tied her hair in a messy bun, and approached the table with her best professional smile, the one she'd perfected after 2 years dealing with difficult customers. "Good morning. Sorry for the wait, what can I bring you?" The woman didn't even look up from her phone. "A double cappuccino decaf with almond milk, no sugar but with 2 packets of natural sweetener, and I want the foam exactly 2 centimeters from the rim. And quickly, I have an important meeting." "Of course, no problem." Scarlett mentally noted everything. They couldn't waste paper on simple orders. While preparing the world's most complicated drink, her thoughts drifted to college. She had a business administration exam on Tuesday and still hadn't been able to buy the required textbook. $200 for a book she'd use for just 1 semester was simply impossible on a waitress's salary. "Scarlett," Tony yelled again. "Table 3 is waiting." She served the perfect cappuccino to the demanding woman, who barely mumbled a thanks before rushing out with the cup in hand. No tip, obviously. The rest of the morning was a blur of orders, dirty dishes, spilled coffee, and impatient customers. At 10:30, when the rush finally died down, Scarlett leaned against the counter for a moment, massaging her aching feet inside the cheap shoes that were starting to fall apart. That's when he walked in. The door chime rang softly, and Scarlett looked up to see a tall man with dark brown hair slightly disheveled by the rain that had stopped a while ago. He wore a simple coat, faded jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. Nothing extraordinary, except for his eyes, blue like the sky after a storm, with the expression of someone carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He looked around the cafe as if it were the first time he'd seen such a place, with a mixture of curiosity and relief on his face. When his eyes met Scarlett's, he smiled. Not the forced smile she saw on most customers, but something genuine and warm that made her stomach do a little flip. "Good morning," he said, approaching the counter with hesitant steps. "Could you recommend something? I'm kind of new around here." His voice was soft, with an accent she couldn't completely identify. Definitely American, but educated, as if he'd come from some more sophisticated region. "Sure." Scarlett felt her mood improve instantly. "Depending on what you like, our house coffee is pretty strong, perfect for mornings like this. Or if you prefer something milder, we have a special blend that I suggested for the menu myself." "You suggested it?" He seemed genuinely impressed. "Then it must be good. I'll have that one. Plain or with something?" "Plain is perfect." While preparing the drink, Scarlett observed him from the corner of her eye. He wasn't on his phone like all the other customers. Instead, he looked out the window with a thoughtful expression, as if he were running from something or someone. "Here you go," she said, placing the steaming cup in front of him. He took a sip, and his eyes lit up. "Wow, this is really very good." "Thank you," It's a blend of Colombian beans with a touch of vanilla. It took me weeks to convince Tony to let me try it. Tony's the owner? Manager. And no, he doesn't like innovations much. She laughed. How much is it? $2.50. He handed her a $5 bill. Keep the change. Scarlett blinked in surprise. Tips of $2.50 weren't exactly common, especially for a plain coffee. Are you sure? That's quite a bit. I'm sure. For the excellent service and perfect recommendation. At that moment, the chime rang again and 3 customers entered, talking loudly and looking rushed. The magical moment broke. Well, I need to. She gestured toward the new customers. Of course, thank you so much. He hesitated, looking at her name tag. Scarlett, pretty name. Thank you. Peterson, he said after a small pause. Peterson Santos. Nice to meet you, Peterson. He waved and headed to a corner table, the same one where the demanding woman had sat earlier. Scarlett went to serve the other customers but couldn't stop looking in his direction. Peterson, what an interesting name for someone with that accent. He stayed almost an hour, drinking his coffee slowly and looking out the window. Occasionally she caught him looking in her direction, and when their eyes met, he smiled in that way that made her heart speed up a little. When he finally got up to leave, he passed by the counter once more. Scarlett? Yes? Do you work here every day? The question caught her off guard. Most days, yes. Why? Just curious. The coffee here is very good. I think I'll come back tomorrow. And with that, he left, leaving Scarlett with a strange and inexplicable feeling that something important had just happened. The rest of the day flew by. Between orders and cleaning, she found herself thinking about the mysterious customer with blue eyes and a gentle smile. There was something about him that was different from the others, a hidden sadness perhaps, or a loneliness she recognized because she felt the same thing sometimes. At 7 p.m., when she finally finished her 12-hour shift, Scarlett counted the day's tips. $43, much better than average, mainly thanks to Peterson Santos's generosity. While waiting for the bus home, drizzling again, she smiled, thinking that maybe the day hadn't been so bad after all. Maybe it had even been the beginning of something good. She had no idea that 15 blocks away, in a penthouse that cost more than she would earn in 10 years, Peterson Richardson, not Santos, was looking out the window of the 47th floor, thinking about the blonde waitress with the warm smile who had transformed the worst day of his life into something bearable. And in his apartment, on the imported marble table, was a golden invitation to the engagement party that would take place in exactly 59 days, announcing his marriage to Alice Wellington, a woman he didn't love, to save a company he didn't want to inherit. But for a few precious hours in that humble cafe, he had felt like a normal person, like Peterson Santos, the freelance accountant who could fall in love with a waitress without it meaning the end of the world. The problem is that lies, even well-intentioned ones, have a life of their own, and this one was about to grow far beyond what either of them could imagine. Peterson Richardson had owned 17 cars in his life, but none of them had ever failed to start when he needed them most, until today. Standing in his private garage at 6:47 a.m., watching his Aston Martin make pathetic clicking sounds instead of purring to life, Peterson felt the familiar weight of irony crushing down on him. He had a board meeting at 8 a.m., where his father would once again remind everyone why the engagement to Alice Wellington was essential for the company's future. And his backup car, a Tesla that cost more than most people's houses, was at the dealership getting detailed. Sir? James, his driver, appeared from the adjacent apartment where he lived. Is there a problem? The car won't start, Peterson said, stating the obvious while loosening his Italian silk tie. Even at this early hour, he felt suffocated by the weight of expectations. I can call a taxi, or perhaps... No. The word came out sharper than he intended. Peterson ran his hands through his hair, messing up the perfectly styled look his personal groomer had achieved an hour earlier. Actually, yes, call a taxi, but not for the office. James raised an eyebrow but said nothing. After 3 years working for the Richardson family, he'd learned that the young heir sometimes made impulsive decisions, especially when stressed. Where to, sir? Peterson closed his eyes and saw blonde hair and a genuine smile. "Downtown. I'll text you the address." 20 minutes later, he was standing outside Sunrise Cafe, wearing a $1,000 suit and feeling completely out of place. Through the window, he could see Scarlett moving efficiently between tables, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, that same warm smile lighting up her face as she chatted with customers. He almost turned around 3 times. The rational part of his brain, the part trained in business strategy and risk assessment, screamed that this was madness. He was Peterson Richardson, heir to a media empire, engaged to be married in 58 days to secure a merger that would save both families from financial scandal. He had no business being here, definitely no business lying to a sweet waitress about who he was. But the other part of his brain, the part that had been slowly suffocating under the weight of his predetermined life, whispered that maybe, just maybe, he deserved a few moments of happiness before his gilded cage locked forever. The suit had to go. He walked 3 blocks to a thrift store that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. The elderly owner, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, looked at him like he'd fallen from another planet when he walked in wearing Armani. "Can I help you, dear?" "I need normal clothes," Peterson said, feeling ridiculous. "Like regular person clothes." She studied him for a moment, then smiled knowingly. "Running away from something?" "More like running toward something," he admitted. $20 later, Peterson Richardson had transformed into Peterson Santos. The jeans were a little loose, the flannel shirt was softer than anything he'd owned in years, and the worn sneakers actually felt comfortable. He caught his reflection in the store window and barely recognized himself. For the first time in months, he looked happy. The cafe was busier than the day before. Scarlett was juggling 4 tables, her cheeks flushed with the effort, but she still managed to smile at each customer. When she saw him walk in, her face lit up in a way that made his chest tighten. "Peterson, you came back." "I told you I would," he said, amazed at how easy it was to smile around her. "Is that special blend available?" "Always, for my favorite customer." She winked and headed to the coffee machine. Favorite customer. He'd been coming here for exactly 1 day, and was already her favorite customer. When was the last time anyone had been genuinely happy to see him, not because of his name or his money, but just because of who he was? "So," Scarlett said as she prepared his coffee, "what does a freelance accountant do all day? I've always been curious about that field." And there it was. The moment of truth. He could come clean right now, tell her who he really was, and watch that beautiful smile disappear when she realized he'd been lying. Or, "Oh, you know," he said, hating himself a little more with each word. "Mostly helping small businesses with their books, making sure everything adds up. Pretty boring stuff, really." "That doesn't sound boring at all. I'm actually studying business administration at night school. Numbers fascinate me." Her eyes sparkled with genuine interest. "Do you enjoy it?" The question caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had asked if he enjoyed his work? In his real life, enjoyment wasn't part of the equation. Duty, responsibility, family expectations, those were the driving forces. Yes, actually, I do." And surprisingly, it wasn't entirely a lie. He'd always been good with numbers, had even considered studying accounting before his father made it clear that Richardson men didn't pursue common careers. "That's wonderful. Most people hate their jobs." She handed him his coffee. "Here you go, on the house today." "What? No, I can't." "Sure you can. Yesterday's tip was way too generous, so today's coffee is my treat." She grinned mischievously. "Don't argue with the waitress, Peterson Santos. We have our ways of getting revenge." He laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in weeks. "What kind of revenge are we talking about here?" "Oh, you know, decaf instead of regular. Accidentally forgetting the sugar. Maybe mixing up your order with the guy who always asks for extra hot sauce in his coffee." She shuddered dramatically. "Yes, that's a real customer. I don't understand it either. Hot sauce in coffee? That's..." He searched for words. Disturbing? Weird? A crime against humanity? I was going to say creative, but your options work too. They were interrupted by Tony's voice booming from behind the counter. Martinez, table 6 is waiting. Scarlett's smile faltered slightly. Duty calls, but don't disappear, okay? I want to hear more about the exciting world of freelance accounting. As she hurried away, Peterson settled into the same corner table as yesterday and watched her work. She moved with practiced efficiency, but he noticed the small things. How she remembered customers' usual orders, how she always had a kind word even for the grumpiest patrons, how she never let Tony's gruff attitude affect her sunny disposition. His phone buzzed, a text from his assistant. Board meeting postponed to 10 a.m. Your father wants to discuss wedding details afterward. Wedding details. Peterson's stomach churned. In 58 days, he'd be standing at an altar with Alice Wellington, promising to love and cherish her while knowing it was all a business transaction. Alice was beautiful, intelligent, and came from the right family, but there was no spark between them. Their conversations were polite and surface level. Their few dates had felt like job interviews, and their rare moments alone were filled with awkward silence. Nothing like this. Nothing like the easy conversation and genuine laughter he'd shared with Scarlett in less than 24 hours. You look like someone stole your puppy. Scarlett's voice broke through his dark thoughts. She was standing beside his table with a fresh pot of coffee and a concerned expression. Just thinking about work, he said, which wasn't entirely false. Want to talk about it? I'm a pretty good listener. She glanced around the cafe. The morning rush was over and only a few customers remained. And I've got a few minutes before the lunch crowd hits. Peterson looked into her warm brown eyes and felt something crack open in his chest. When was the last time someone had offered to listen to his problems without wanting something in return? It's complicated, he said finally. The best problems usually are. She sat down across from him, propping her chin on her hand. Try me. Well, he chose his words carefully. Let's say you're in a situation where you have to make a choice between what's expected of you and what might make you happy. But choosing happiness could hurt other people you care about. Scarlett was quiet for a moment, considering. Can I ask how many people we're talking about? The ones who might get hurt? A lot. My family, their employees. It's a whole chain reaction thing. And the happiness? Is it real or just a fantasy? Peterson's eyes met hers, and for a moment he forgot to breathe. I don't know yet, but it feels possible. For the first time in a long time, it feels possible. Then maybe, she said softly, you owe it to yourself to find out. Life's too short to spend it making everyone else happy while you're miserable, even if pursuing that happiness means being dishonest. She frowned slightly. Dishonest how? This was it. The perfect moment to come clean, to tell her everything and let the chips fall where they may. Just not being completely upfront about who I am, he said instead, taking the coward's path once again. Oh, Peterson. Her expression softened. We all wear masks sometimes. The question is whether you're hiding something that would hurt someone, or just protecting yourself while you figure things out. If only she knew. The door chime rang, and a group of business people in expensive suits walked in, talking loudly into their phones. Peterson automatically hunched down in his seat, but none of them looked his way. Lunch crowd starting early today, Scarlett observed, standing up. I should probably. Scarlett? He caught her hand without thinking. The contact sent a small shock through both of them. Thank you for listening. Anytime, she said, and he could tell she meant it. As she walked away to serve the new customers, Peterson pulled out his phone and stared at the 17 missed calls from his father. In his real life, disappearing for 3 hours without explanation was unthinkable. But sitting in this small cafe, watching Scarlett laugh with customers and hum softly as she worked, Peterson felt more like himself than he had in years. His phone buzzed with a text from Alice. Darling, the wedding planner needs to know your preference for centerpieces. White roses or white peonies? Either way, very elegant and appropriate for our image. Our image. Not their love, not their happiness. Their image. Peterson turned off his phone. He stayed another hour, nursing his coffee and watching Scarlett work. Every so often, she'd catch his eye and smile, or bring him a refill without being asked, or share a funny comment about a difficult customer. It was easy and natural, and everything his real life wasn't. When he finally left, he promised to come back tomorrow and meant it. Walking back to where his driver waited with a replacement car, Peterson felt like he was leaving one world and entering another. The expensive suit in the thrift store bag felt heavier than it should, like armor he didn't want to put back on. But as he changed clothes in the back seat, transforming back into Peterson Richardson, heir and unwilling groom, he held on to the memory of Scarlett's smile and the way she'd listened to his problems without judgment. For 57 more days, he could have this small slice of happiness in the form of a blonde waitress who thought he was just a regular guy with regular problems. What could possibly go wrong? 15 blocks away, Alice Wellington put down her phone with a satisfied smile. The private investigator she'd hired had just sent the most interesting photographs. Her fiancé, dressed like a common person, sitting in a rundown cafe with a waitress who was clearly smitten with him. How deliciously predictable. Men always thought they were so clever when they were actually being utterly transparent. But Alice wasn't worried. If anything, this made her plan easier. Let Peterson have his little fantasy. Let him think he was getting away with something. When the time came to destroy it all, the fall would be so much more devastating. And Alice Wellington had never been one to show mercy. 3 weeks into what Peterson had started calling his double life, he had established a routine that would have impressed a CIA operative. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., he left his penthouse wearing designer suits and carrying a briefcase full of merger documents. By 7:15, he was changing into thrift store clothes in the parking garage of a 24-hour gym he'd joined specifically for this purpose. By 7:30, he was walking into Sunrise Cafe as Peterson Santos, freelance accountant, ready to spend an hour in paradise before returning to his gilded prison. The system was foolproof. Until the morning Scarlett wasn't there. "Where's Scarlett?" Peterson asked Tony, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. In 3 weeks, she'd never missed a morning shift. "Called in sick?" Tony grunted, not looking up from his newspaper. "Got some kind of flu. Probably be out all week." Peterson's coffee tasted like cardboard. The cafe felt empty without her bright smile and easy chatter. He stayed exactly 15 minutes, enough time to not seem suspicious, then left, feeling unmoored. For the first time in weeks, he actually paid attention during his morning board meeting. "The Wellington merger is proceeding ahead of schedule," his father, Richard Richardson, announced to the room full of executives. "The engagement announcement generated significant positive press, and our stock prices have stabilized." Peterson nodded at appropriate intervals while privately wondering if Scarlett was okay. Did she have anyone to bring her soup? Did her roommates know how to take care of her? "Peterson?" His father's sharp voice cut through his wandering thoughts. "Did you hear what I said?" "Sorry, I was thinking about the quarterly projections. I said Alice has scheduled the final venue walkthrough for this Saturday. You're expected to attend." "Of course." The words felt like ash in his mouth. After the meeting, Peterson found himself doing something he'd never done before, Googling how to help someone with the flu. Within an hour, he'd ordered chicken soup, orange juice, tissues, and every cold medicine known to mankind to be delivered to Sunrise Cafe, with instructions for Tony to pass them along to Scarlett. It was a risky move, but he told himself that Peterson Santos would naturally be concerned about a friend who was sick. That afternoon, he got a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for the care package. How did you get my number, Scarlett?" He stared at the phone, realizing he'd made his first real mistake. Peterson Santos wouldn't have had access to employee emergency contact information. Peterson Richardson, however, could get anyone's phone number with a single call to the right person. "Tony gave it to me," he texted back, hoping she wouldn't think to verify that obvious lie. "Feeling better?" "Much, though I think you bought enough medicine to cure a small army." "Very sweet of you." The emoji made him smile like an idiot for the rest of the day. By Thursday, Scarlett was back at work, though still a bit pale. When Peterson walked in that morning, she practically bounced over to him. "My hero," she announced dramatically. "Tony said you specifically asked him to make sure I got everything." That was incredibly thoughtful. "It was nothing," Peterson said, though his heart did a little flip at being called her hero. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thanks to Dr. Santos and his magic cure-all package." She started making his usual coffee without being asked. "I owe you dinner." Peterson nearly choked on air. "You what?" "Dinner. It's the least I can do. I know this great little place. Nothing fancy, but they make amazing pasta." "What do you say? Tomorrow night?" Every rational thought in Peterson's head screamed that this was a terrible idea. Dating Scarlett, because that's what this was, regardless of what they called it, would complicate everything. He was engaged to another woman, lying about his identity, and living a life built on deception. "I'd love to," he heard himself say. "Perfect. I'll text you the address." She beamed at him. "Fair warning, though. I'm a terrible cook, so don't expect anything homemade. But I'm an excellent orderer of takeout." "Takeout sounds perfect." As she handed him his coffee, their fingers brushed, and Peterson felt that familiar electric shock. 3 weeks of these small moments, these tiny connections, and he was completely lost. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being a harmless escape and had become something much more dangerous. Something that felt suspiciously like falling in love. That same morning, across town in a designer penthouse that overlooked Central Park, Alice Wellington was having the most productive week of her life. "Perfect," she said, reviewing the photos her private investigator had provided. "Absolutely perfect." The pictures told a fascinating story. Peterson Richardson, media heir, and her reluctant fiancé had been living a secret life for 3 weeks. Every morning he visited a rundown cafe in a neighborhood he'd never stepped foot in before their engagement. Every morning, he spent exactly 1 hour chatting with the same blonde waitress. And yesterday, he'd sent her enough care packages to stock a small pharmacy. "What would you like me to do with this information, Miss Wellington?" asked Marcus Chen, the investigator she'd hired. Marcus specialized in celebrity scandals and corporate espionage, and had never failed to deliver exactly what his clients needed. "Nothing yet," Alice said, placing the photos in a leather portfolio. "Keep watching. I want to know everything about this girl. Where she lives, where she goes to school, her family, her dreams, her fears. Everything." "And Mr. Richardson?" "Oh, let Peterson have his fun. Men are so predictable when they think they're being rebellious." Alice's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "The longer this goes on, the more invested he'll become. And when I'm ready to end it..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Marcus had worked for enough vengeful socialites to understand exactly what Alice Wellington was planning, and he almost felt sorry for the poor waitress who had no idea she was about to become collateral damage in a war between titans. Almost. But Marcus Chen was paid very well not to have a conscience. "There's one more thing," Alice continued, walking to her floor-to-ceiling windows. "I want you to arrange for someone to become a regular at this cafe. Someone who can get close to the girl, earn her trust. I want to know what she knows about Peterson, and more importantly, I want to control the flow of information." "What kind of person did you have in mind?" Alice's reflection in the window showed a smile that would have made sharks nervous. "Someone charming. Someone she'll want to confide in. Someone who can plant the right seeds when the time comes. I have just the person." "Excellent. Begin immediately." After Marcus left, Alice poured herself a glass of champagne and raised it to her reflection. "Here's to you, Peterson Richardson. Enjoy your little fantasy while it lasts." She had 54 days until their wedding, and by the time she was finished, Peterson would be so grateful to escape his scandalous affair with a working-class nobody that he'd practically sprint down the aisle. The best part? She'd destroy the waitress's life in the process, and Peterson would never even know Alice had orchestrated the whole thing. Some people called it ruthless. Alice called it strategic. After all, she hadn't clawed her way to the top of New York society by being nice. Friday evening found Peterson standing outside Scarlett's apartment building, holding a bottle of wine that cost more than her monthly rent, and wondering if he'd completely lost his mind. The building was everything his penthouse wasn't. Old, slightly run down, with character carved into every brick. He could hear music drifting from open windows, the sound of families sharing dinner, life being lived without pretense or performance. When Scarlett opened the door, Peterson forgot how to breathe. She was wearing a simple sundress in soft blue that brought out her eyes, her hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. No makeup, no designer clothes, no carefully curated image. Just Scarlett, beautiful and real, and completely oblivious to the effect she had on him. "Wow," she said, looking him up and down. "You clean up nice, Peterson Santos." He'd chosen his outfit carefully, dark jeans and a button-down shirt that looked expensive enough to be quality, but not so expensive as to raise questions. The wine, however, was a mistake he realized too late. "I brought wine," he said, holding up the bottle. "I hope you like red." Scarlett took the bottle and her eyes widened slightly as she read the label. "This is really nice. Like, really, really nice. Are you sure you're just a freelance accountant?" Peterson's heart stopped. I have a client who pays well. Big corporation, lots of complex books to manage." It wasn't technically a lie. He did manage the books for a big corporation, his family's media empire. And they did pay him well, considering he was set to inherit the whole thing. "Must be some client," Scarlett said, but she was smiling. "Come on in. Fair warning, my roommates are a lot." The apartment was small but cozy, with mismatched furniture that somehow worked together and photos covering every available surface. Two young women were sprawled on the couch, both looking up with undisguised curiosity when Peterson walked in. "Peterson, meet my roommates, that's Jenny." Scarlett pointed to a petite brunette with paint-stained fingers, "and that's Maya." She indicated a tall redhead with multiple ear piercings and a textbook in her lap. "The mysterious coffee shop guy," Jenny exclaimed, bouncing up from the couch. "Scarlett talks about you constantly. Peterson this, Peterson that. Peterson brought me soup when I was sick like some kind of knight in shining armor." "Jenny," Scarlett's face turned bright red. "I do not talk about him constantly." "You absolutely do," Maya chimed in, not looking up from her book. "It's actually kind of adorable and slightly nauseating." Peterson found himself grinning. "It's nice to meet you both. And for the record, bringing soup to sick friends is basic human decency, not knighthood." "See?" Scarlett shot her roommates a look. "He's humble too. It's disgusting how perfect he is." "Perfect?" Peterson raised an eyebrow. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "Nope," Jenny said cheerfully. "Scarlett's standards are usually terrible. The fact that she likes you means you're either genuinely great or a sociopathic serial killer. And since you brought premium cold medicine, I'm going with genuinely great." "Ignore them," Scarlett said, grabbing Peterson's hand. "Let's eat before they embarrass me further." As she led him to the small dining area, Peterson marveled at how normal this felt. The casual teasing, the warmth, the complete absence of ulterior motives or social positioning. In his world, dinner invitations came with agendas. Here, Scarlett had invited him simply because she wanted to spend time with him. When was the last time someone had wanted to spend time with Peterson Richardson, the person rather than Peterson Richardson the heir? Dinner was Chinese takeout, eaten straight from the containers, accompanied by conversation that ranged from Scarlett's business classes to Peterson's made-up accounting adventures to their shared love of old movies. The wine, which really had been ridiculously expensive, paired surprisingly well with lo mein and spring rolls. "Okay, confession time," Scarlett said as they finished eating. "I Googled freelance accounting after we first met." Peterson's blood turned to ice. "You did?" "Yeah, and it sounds way more interesting than I thought. All that detective work, finding discrepancies, helping small businesses succeed." She leaned forward, eyes bright with interest. "What's the most interesting case you've worked on?" Peterson's mind raced. He needed a story that sounded believable but not too specific, in case she asked follow-up questions later. There was this small family restaurant, he said slowly, drawing from a half-remembered article he'd read. They were hemorrhaging money but couldn't figure out why. Turns out their manager was skimming from the till and cooking the books to cover it up. No way. What did you do? Followed the paper trail, documented everything, helped them build a case. Peterson was warming to the story now, surprised by how easy it was to lie when the lie served a greater truth. They were able to recover most of the stolen money and save the restaurant. That's amazing. You literally saved their livelihood. Scarlett's eyes were shining with admiration. You're like a financial superhero. Peterson laughed, but it sounded hollow to his own ears. Hardly. Just doing my job. Don't be modest. Most people wouldn't care enough to really dig deep like that. If only she knew that in his real life, Peterson was the one people needed saving from. His family's business practices weren't illegal, but they weren't always ethical either. How many small businesses had Richardson Media crushed over the years? How many people had lost their livelihoods to corporate mergers and cost-cutting measures he'd personally approved? Peterson? Scarlett's voice brought him back to the present. You okay? You looked like you went somewhere else for a minute. Just thinking about work, he said, which was becoming his default excuse for everything. Well, stop it. Work thoughts are banned during dinner. She reached across the table and took his hand. Besides, I have something more important to discuss. More important than financial superheroes? Much more important. Her expression turned serious. I've been saving money for months to open my own cafe someday. Nothing big, just a little place where people can feel comfortable and welcome. And after watching you enjoy your coffee every morning, after seeing how you treat everyone with kindness. She paused, suddenly looking nervous. What is it, Scarlett? I was wondering if maybe, when I'm ready to open my place, you might want to help with the business side, the accounting, the financial planning, all that stuff I'm terrible at. She rushed on before he could respond. I know we haven't known each other very long, and I probably can't afford your usual rates, but yes. Yes? Yes, I'd love to help you with your cafe. Peterson squeezed her hand, amazed by how much he meant it. And don't worry about my rates. For you, I work for coffee and conversation. Scarlett's smile could have powered the entire city. Really? Really? What he didn't say was that in 53 days he'd be married to Alice Wellington and this conversation would become nothing but a beautiful memory. What he didn't say was that he'd probably never see her cafe, never help her achieve her dreams, never be anything more than a brief chapter in her life. What he didn't say was that sitting in her tiny apartment, holding her hand and planning a future he couldn't have, was both the happiest and most heartbreaking moment of his life. But for now, for tonight, he could pretend. He could be Peterson Santos, the freelance accountant who was falling in love with a waitress who wanted to change the world one cup of coffee at a time. The lies were getting easier. That was the most terrifying part of all. The first crack in Peterson's perfect lie came in the form of a food blogger named David Kim. David appeared at Sunrise Cafe on a Tuesday morning, all easy smiles and designer casual wear that screamed, "I have money but want to look relatable." He ordered an elaborate coffee creation, complimented Scarlett's service with just the right amount of charm, and somehow managed to snag the table right next to Peterson's usual spot. "Great coffee," David said to Peterson after Scarlett walked away. "I'm David, by the way, new to the neighborhood." "Peterson," he replied cautiously. Something felt off about this guy, though he couldn't pinpoint what. "So you're a regular here? This place has such authentic charm." "I'm actually a food blogger, always looking for hidden gems like this." Peterson's blood ran cold. Food bloggers meant publicity. Publicity meant attention. Attention was the last thing he needed. "It's just a neighborhood cafe," Peterson said carefully. "Nothing special about it." "Oh, I disagree." David's eyes lit up with suspicious enthusiasm. "Places like this are exactly what my readers love. Real, genuine, unpretentious. And that waitress, Scarlett, she's got such a natural warmth. Perfect for social media. Over the next week, David became a fixture at the cafe. He engaged Scarlett in long conversations about her dreams, her background, her evening classes. He took photos of his food, of the cafe's interior, of Scarlett herself, always with permission, always charming about it. Peterson watched this invasion with growing unease, but couldn't say anything without revealing his own secrets. How could Peterson Santos, freelance accountant, explain why he was so protective of a waitress he'd supposedly known for less than a month? Meanwhile, Scarlett was thriving under the attention. David's genuine interest in her cafe dreams gave her someone new to share her excitement with, and his food blog connections offered possibilities she'd never imagined. "He thinks I should start an Instagram for my future cafe," she told Peterson excitedly one morning. "Build a following before I even open, isn't that brilliant?" "Brilliant," Peterson agreed weakly, watching David type notes into his phone across the room. What Peterson didn't know was that David's real last name wasn't Kim, it was Harrison, and he was one of Manhattan's most skilled social manipulators. Alice Wellington had chosen him specifically for this job because of his ability to gain trust quickly and extract information naturally. And David was very, very good at his job. The second crack came during Peterson's engagement party venue walkthrough. "The Wellington estate is perfect for our announcement," Alice said, gliding through the marble-columned ballroom like she owned it, which, technically, her family did. 500 guests, full media coverage, the works. Peterson nodded absently, his mind still back at the cafe where Scarlett was probably dealing with the lunch rush. It had been 3 hours since he'd seen her, and he was already experiencing withdrawal symptoms. "Peterson, darling, are you listening?" Alice's voice had an edge sharper than her smile. "Sorry, just thinking about the quarterly reports." "How dedicated of you." Alice's eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. "But surely even corporate heirs deserve a break from work occasionally. Perhaps you've found some recreational activities to help you relax?" The question felt loaded, but Peterson couldn't figure out why. "Not really. Just the usual. Gym, reading, the occasional movie." "How wonderfully simple." Alice linked her arm through his. "Well, after we're married, I'll make sure you have more stimulating diversions, starting with our honeymoon in Dubai. I've already booked the royal suite." Dubai. Peterson's stomach dropped. He'd been so focused on the 50-day countdown to the wedding that he'd forgotten about the honeymoon. 2 weeks in a foreign country with Alice, playing the part of devoted husband, while his heart remained in a small cafe with a blonde waitress who thought he was someone else entirely. "That sounds lovely," he managed. "I thought you'd be pleased. The Wellington name opens doors everywhere, you know. We'll be treated like actual royalty." As Alice continued describing their lavish future together, Peterson felt the walls of his predetermined life closing in. Every detail she mentioned, the exclusive restaurants, the private yacht excursions, the carefully orchestrated photo opportunities, represented another step away from the simple happiness he'd found with Scarlett. But what choice did he have? His father had made it clear that backing out of this engagement would destroy both families financially. Hundreds of employees would lose their jobs. The scandal would ruin Richardson Media's reputation permanently. His happiness wasn't worth all that collateral damage. Was it? The third crack came that evening, when Peterson arrived at Scarlett's apartment for their weekly dinner date and found her in tears. "Hey, what's wrong?" He pulled her into his arms immediately, his heart clenching at the sight of her distress. "My dad called," she said, voice muffled against his chest. "He lost his job. The company he's worked for 20 years just eliminated his position. Corporate restructuring, they said." Peterson's blood turned to ice. "What company?" "Morrison Holdings. They got bought out by some big media conglomerate, and now they're streamlining operations." She air-quoted with bitter emphasis. "Streamlining? Like my dad's life isn't worth more than a line item on a budget." Peterson knew Morrison Holdings. Richardson Media had acquired them 6 months ago. and he'd personally signed off on the restructuring plan that had eliminated nearly 200 positions. He'd told himself it was necessary for fiscal responsibility, that the long-term benefits outweighed the short-term pain. He'd never thought about the families behind those eliminated positions, never considered that one of them might belong to the woman he was falling in love with. "I'm so sorry, Scarlett. The worst part is he won't take any help from me. Says I need my money for school, that he'll figure something out." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "But he's 58, Peterson. Who's going to hire a 58-year-old accountant in this economy?" 58-year-old accountant. The irony was so bitter Peterson could taste it. Maybe I could help," he offered desperately. "I have connections in the financial world. I could make some calls." "You're sweet, but what kind of connections could a freelance accountant have that would matter to someone like my dad?" Scarlett wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "This is corporate America, Peterson. Little guys like us don't win against the big players." If only she knew that he was one of the biggest players of all, that with a single phone call, he could not only get her father a new job, but probably a better one than he'd lost. That the corporate restructuring that had destroyed her family's security had been approved by the same hands that were now holding her while she cried. The guilt was crushing. "There has to be something we can do," Peterson said. "Unless you secretly know the CEO of Richardson Media, I don't think so." Scarlett laughed bitterly. "Those people live in a different world from us. They make decisions from their ivory towers and never think about the real people who get hurt." Peterson flinched as if she'd slapped him. "Hey." Scarlett cupped his face in her hands. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound so bitter. It's just frustrating, you know? Feeling so powerless against forces you can't even see." "You're not powerless," Peterson said fiercely. "You're the strongest person I know. You work 12-hour days, go to school at night, and still find time to dream about opening your own cafe. You're going to change the world, Scarlett Martinez. One cup of coffee at a time." She smiled through her tears. "When did you become such an optimist?" "When I met you." They ordered pizza and spent the evening on her couch, watching old romantic comedies and talking about everything except the things that really mattered. Peterson held her close and tried not to think about how many other families had been destroyed by decisions he'd made in boardrooms far removed from their consequences. When he finally left that night, Scarlett walked him to the door. "Peterson? Yeah? Thank you. For being here, for listening, for caring. I don't know what I'd do without you." The words hit him like a physical blow. In 47 days, she was going to find out exactly what she'd do without him, and it was going to destroy her. As he walked away from her building, Peterson pulled out his phone and made a call. "Richardson Media, how may I help you?" "This is Peterson Richardson. I need you to compile a list of all available positions in our finance department, senior level, and I need the contact information for Morrison Holdings' former employees." "Sir?" "It's nearly midnight." "Now," Peterson said firmly. He couldn't tell Scarlett who he really was. He couldn't cancel his engagement without destroying both families. But he could damn well make sure her father had a job by morning. It wasn't much, but it was something. And right now, something was all he had to offer. Scarlett's scream of joy could be heard 3 blocks away. "He got it, Peterson, he got the job." She launched herself into his arms the moment he walked into the cafe, spinning around the small space like a tornado of happiness. "Richardson Media called him yesterday. Senior financial analyst, better salary than his old job, full benefits." Peterson's heart hammered against his ribs as he held her. "That's incredible news." "Incredible? It's a miracle." Dad said the interviewer told him they'd been specifically looking for someone with his exact experience. Can you believe that timing? "Amazing timing," Peterson agreed weakly. "The best part? The HR person said someone in upper management had personally recommended him based on his stellar record at Morrison Holdings. Someone noticed, Peterson, someone actually noticed that he's worth more than a budget cut." The irony was suffocating. Scarlett was thanking the universe for the kindness of the same person who'd caused her pain in the first place. And she was looking at Peterson like he'd hung the moon. when he was the one who'd created this whole mess. "I'm so happy for you," he said, and meant it desperately. "You know what this means?" Scarlett's eyes sparkled with fresh tears of joy. "I can stop worrying about my parents and focus on my cafe fund again. Dad even said he might be able to help me with the down payment now that he's stable." Peterson smiled, but something cold settled in his stomach. In 39 days, he'd be married to Alice Wellington. Scarlett would eventually discover who Peterson Santos really was. And when she did, she'd realize that every good thing that had happened, her father's job, their relationship, maybe even her future cafe, had been built on lies. "Earth to Peterson." Scarlett waved her hand in front of his face. "You're doing that thing again where you disappear into your head. What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just happy for your family." "Liar." She studied his face carefully. "You've been weird for weeks. Distracted like you're carrying some huge secret." Her expression softened. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" The temptation was overwhelming. To just say the words, "I'm not who you think I am," and let the chips fall where they may. But how could he explain that he was Peterson Richardson, heir to the empire that had destroyed her father's life before saving it? How could he tell her that in 39 days he was marrying another woman to save companies she'd never heard of? "Just work stress," he said instead. "Big client, complicated books." Scarlett didn't look convinced, but before she could press further, the door chime announced a new customer. Peterson looked up and felt his world tilt sideways. Alice Wellington walked into Sunrise Cafe like she owned it. She was dressed down by her standards, designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Scarlett made in a month. But she still looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Every head in the cafe turned, including Scarlett's. "Welcome to Sunrise," Scarlett called cheerfully. "Sit anywhere you'd like." "Thank you, darling." Alice's smile was razor sharp as her eyes found Peterson. "Actually, I think I'll sit right here." She chose the table directly across from Peterson's corner spot, settling in with predatory grace. Peterson's hands shook so badly he had to put down his coffee cup. "Peterson?" Scarlett appeared at his side, concern written across her face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," he managed, not taking his eyes off Alice. "Just thought I recognized someone." Alice was playing with her phone, occasionally glancing around the cafe with apparent interest. To anyone watching, she looked like just another customer. But Peterson knew better. This wasn't coincidence. "What can I get you?" Scarlett approached Alice's table with her usual warm professionalism. "Oh, let's see." Alice studied the menu like she was solving world hunger. "This is such a charming little place, very authentic. Do you have anything with oat milk?" "Of course, we have several options." "Wonderful. I'll have a large oat milk latte, extra hot with 2 pumps of vanilla. And could you make the foam art extra pretty? I simply must get a photo for my Instagram." Peterson watched in horrified fascination as Alice charmed Scarlett with practiced ease. She complimented the cafe's decor, asked about Scarlett's background with apparent genuine interest, and even managed to work in questions about the regular customers. "That gentleman over there," Alice gestured subtly toward Peterson, "seems to really enjoy this place. He's been here both times I've stopped by." "Oh, Peterson." Scarlett's face lit up. "He's wonderful. Been coming here every day for over a month now. Such a sweet guy. He even brought me care packages when I was sick." "How thoughtful. What does he do?" "He's a freelance accountant. Very successful too, judging by how generous he is with tips." Alice's smile could have powered a small city. "How interesting. I might have to ask him for some business advice. I'm always looking for good financial guidance." Peterson felt like he was watching a car crash in slow motion. Every word Scarlett spoke was another nail in his coffin, and there was nothing he could do to stop it without revealing everything. "I should get back to him," Scarlett said, finishing Alice's elaborate drink. "He looks a little pale today, probably working too hard." "Men and their work," Alice sighed dramatically. "They never know when to take a break." As Scarlett returned to Peterson's table, Alice pulled out her phone and took several photos of her latte, the cafe, and, most ominously, Peterson himself, though she was subtle about it. "Here." Scarlett set down a fresh coffee in front of Peterson. "On the house. You look like you need it." "Thanks," Peterson said, his voice coming out strangled. "Peterson, are you sure you're okay? You're acting really strange." Before he could answer, Alice appeared beside their table like a beautiful, terrifying apparition. "Excuse me," she said with sugary sweetness. "I couldn't help overhearing that you're an accountant. I'm Alice, and I'm actually looking for some financial advice for my family's business. Would you mind if I joined you for just a moment?" Peterson's mouth opened and closed like a suffocating fish. I'm not really—" "Oh, don't be modest." Scarlett jumped in helpfully. "Peterson's amazing with numbers. I bet he could help you out, right, Peterson?" 3 pairs of eyes stared at him expectantly. Alice's were glittering with malicious amusement. Scarlett's were warm with pride in her boyfriend's abilities, and his own felt like they might pop out of his skull from sheer panic. "I suppose I could spare a few minutes," he heard himself say. Alice slid into the booth next to Scarlett, directly across from Peterson. "Wonderful. So, Peterson Santos, isn't it? Scarlett mentioned your name. Tell me about your practice." The way she said his fake name made it clear she knew exactly who he really was. This was a game to her, and Peterson was the mouse. "I work with various clients," he said carefully. "Mostly small to medium businesses." "How fascinating. And what's your background? Where did you study?" Each question was a landmine. Peterson gave vague answers about state schools and continuing education, all while Alice nodded encouragingly, and Scarlett beamed with pride beside her. "Well," Alice said finally, standing up gracefully, "this has been so enlightening. Peterson, you're clearly very creative in your approach to business. I'll definitely be in touch if I need any advice." The word creative dripped with hidden meaning. "It was lovely meeting you both," Alice continued. "Scarlett, darling, this place is absolutely charming. I'll definitely be back. Maybe I'll even bring some friends. I know several people who would just adore discovering a hidden gem like this." After Alice left, Peterson sat in stunned silence while Scarlett chattered excitedly about the encounter. "She seemed really nice. And did you see her purse? That was definitely designer. If she brings her friends here, it could be amazing for business." Scarlett paused, studying Peterson's face. "Why do you look like you want to throw up?" Because his carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, and the woman he loved was about to be caught in the crossfire of a war she didn't even know was happening. "Just tired," he lied. "I should probably get going." "Already? You just got here." "Work calls," Peterson said, standing on unsteady legs. "I'll see you tomorrow." "Of course." Scarlett looked confused but didn't push. "Peterson, whatever's bothering you, we can figure it out together, okay? That's what people do when they care about each other." The words hit him like a physical blow. People who cared about each other were honest with each other. They didn't build relationships on elaborate lies. They didn't let their fiancés stalk the people they were falling in love with. "I know," he said quietly. "I'll see you tomorrow." As Peterson walked out of the cafe, he caught sight of Alice through the window. She was sitting in a black sedan, speaking animatedly on her phone while watching him leave. The message was clear. She knew everything, and she was just getting started. Peterson had 38 days to figure out how to save Scarlett from the storm that was coming. He was starting to think 38 days might not be nearly enough. The magazine arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by David Kim with the casual precision of a perfectly orchestrated assassination. "Scarlett, you have to see this." David burst into the cafe waving the latest issue of Manhattan Elite like it contained the secrets of the universe. "You're not going to believe what I found." Peterson, who had been enjoying his coffee and 30 minutes of peace before the morning rush, felt his blood turn to ice when he saw the magazine's cover. There, in full-color glory, was a photo of him and Alice at their engagement announcement, with the headline, "Richardson Heirs Billion-Dollar Engagement." "What am I looking at?" Scarlett asked, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached David's table. Look at page 12, David said with barely contained excitement. There's this whole spread about New York's most eligible bachelor finally getting engaged. Peterson Richardson, heir to Richardson Media. And get this, he's marrying Alice Wellington in some massive society wedding next month. Peterson watched in slow-motion horror as Scarlett flipped to the article. Her smile faded as she studied the photos. Peterson in a tuxedo that cost more than her monthly rent. Alice draped in diamonds, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a fairy tale. He's handsome, Scarlett said slowly. Looks a little like... Her voice trailed off as she stared more intently at the page. Right? I thought the same thing when I saw it. Doesn't he remind you of someone? David's voice was innocent, but his eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. Peterson stood abruptly, coffee cup clattering against the saucer. I should get going. Work calls. Peterson, wait. Scarlett's voice was strange, distant. She was still staring at the magazine. Come look at this for a second. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but Peterson found himself walking over to her table like a man heading to his execution. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. The magazine photos showed him at his most polished, professionally styled hair, perfect lighting, designer everything. But the bone structure was the same. The eyes were the same. That's funny, Scarlett said with a laugh that didn't quite work. He could be your twin. Lots of people look alike, Peterson said weakly. Yeah, but this is uncanny. David, don't you think? She looked up at David, who was watching the scene unfold with barely hidden glee. Actually, David said, pulling out his phone, I took some photos of the cafe for my blog last week. Let me show you something. He scrolled through his photos until he found one of Peterson sitting at his usual table, then held it next to the magazine. The comparison was devastating. Okay, that's legitimately creepy, Scarlett said, looking back and forth between the images. Peterson, you could be this guy's body double. Maybe I should apply for the job, Peterson joked, but his voice cracked on the words. Scarlett was studying his face now with new intensity. Your eyes are exactly the same shade of blue. And that little scar by your left eyebrow. She reached up to touch his face, then pulled her hand back to point at the magazine. He has the same one. Coincidence, Peterson said, but he was backing toward the door. Peterson Santos, David said suddenly, his voice sharp with false realization. Santos, that's interesting. Do you know what Peterson Richardson's middle name is? The cafe went silent except for the hum of the coffee machine. It's Santos, David continued relentlessly. Peterson Santos Richardson. His mother was Maria Santos before she married into the Richardson family. The magazine slipped from Scarlett's hands and hit the floor with a sound like breaking glass. No, she whispered. Peterson opened his mouth, but no words came out. He stood frozen in the doorway, caught between two worlds that were never supposed to collide. Scarlett, I can explain. Explain what? Her voice was barely audible. Explain why you've been lying to me for 2 months? Explain why Peterson Santos doesn't exist? He does exist, Peterson said desperately. Santos is my middle name, I wasn't lying about that. But you were lying about everything else. Scarlett's voice cracked like a whip across the cafe. Freelance accountant? Simple guy just trying to make a living? You're Peterson Richardson. You're... She picked up the magazine with shaking hands, staring at the engagement announcement. You're getting married, she finished, the words falling like stones. Scarlett, please. Let me explain. Explain? She laughed, but it sounded like crying. How do you explain this? How do you explain coming here every day, making me fall in? She stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth. Making you fall in what? Peterson stepped toward her, desperate. It doesn't matter now, does it? Scarlett's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're marrying Alice Wellington in... She checked the date on the magazine. In 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Peterson. I know how this looks. How this looks. Scarlett's voice rose to a shout that made everyone in the cafe stop and stare. This looks like you've been playing some sick game with me. Was this fun for you? The poor little waitress who doesn't know any better? No, God no, Scarlett, it was never like that. Then what was it like? She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were slumming it with the working class, while your real fiancé planned your wedding. Alice isn't my real anything, Peterson shouted back, his careful composure finally cracking. I don't love her. I never have. This whole engagement is just a business arrangement to save both our families from financial ruin. Oh, poor you. Scarlett's voice dripped with sarcasm. Forced to marry into another billionaire family to save your empire. My heart bleeds for your suffering. That's not... I didn't... Peterson ran his hands through his hair, destroying the careful styling. I came here because I was suffocating in that life. I came here because I wanted to feel like a real person for once in my life. And I was what? Your little experiment in being normal? Scarlett wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of mascara. Did you go back to your penthouse every night and laugh about the stupid waitress who actually believed Peterson Santos gave a damn about her? I do give a damn about you. Peterson stepped closer, his voice breaking. I love you, Scarlett. I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Don't, Scarlett whispered. Don't you dare say that to me now. It's true. Everything else might have been a lie, but that's true. If you loved me, you would have told me the truth. I tried. So many times I tried to find the words. You had 2 months, Scarlett screamed. 2 months to tell me that you're engaged to another woman. 2 months to tell me that my father lost his job because of your company. 2 months to tell me that everything I believed about you was a lie. Peterson's face went white. How did you know about your father? I'm not stupid, Peterson. I figured it out. Richardson Media bought Morrison Holdings. You're the heir to Richardson Media. You signed off on the layoffs that destroyed my dad's life, didn't you? Yes, he whispered, but I got him a new job. A better job. Oh, how generous of you. You destroyed his life and then threw him scraps to clean up your mess. Scarlett's voice was getting louder with each word. And let me guess, you felt so guilty about it that you decided to play dress-up and come slum it with his daughter. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Peterson? Because I'm having trouble seeing it any other way. The entire cafe was watching now, but neither of them cared. 2 months of carefully buried truth was exploding in the most public way possible. I was drowning, Peterson said quietly, in expectations, in a life I never chose, in an engagement I never wanted. And then I found this place and I found you, and for the first time in my life I felt like I could breathe. So you decided to steal my air instead? What? You made me believe in something that was never real. Scarlett's voice broke completely. You made me believe that someone could love me for who I am, not what I could give them. You made me believe in fairy tales, Peterson, and now I find out I was just your escape from reality. You weren't an escape. You were the most real thing in my life. Then why are you still getting married in 3 weeks? The question hit Peterson like a physical blow, because he didn't have an answer. Not one that would make any of this okay. Because if I don't, hundreds of people will lose their jobs. Both companies will collapse. My father will lose everything he's worked for his entire life. And what about what I've worked for? Scarlett gestured around the cafe. What about my dreams? My cafe? You think I don't matter because I'm not rich enough to save? Of course you matter. You matter more than all of it. Then prove it, Scarlett said, her voice deadly quiet. Cancel the wedding. Choose me. Peterson stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The rational part of his brain reminded him of the consequences. The financial ruin, the destroyed families, the hundreds of innocent employees who would pay the price for his happiness. But the part of his heart that belonged to Scarlett whispered that maybe, just maybe, some things were worth fighting for. He started. Peterson Richardson. The voice came from behind him, cold and sharp as a blade. Peterson turned to see Alice Wellington standing in the doorway of the cafe, looking like an avenging angel in designer white. I thought I might find you here. Alice said, gliding into the cafe like she owned it. When you missed our final cake tasting, I got worried. She looked around the room, taking in Peterson's disheveled appearance, Scarlett's tear-streaked face, and the magazine lying open on the floor between them. "Oh," Alice said with perfect false sympathy. "Did someone have a little revelation?" "Alice, don't," Peterson warned. "Don't what, darling? Don't acknowledge your little midlife crisis?" Alice's smile was razor-sharp. "It's fine, Peterson. We all have our moments of temporary insanity." She turned to Scarlett with condescending kindness. "And you must be the waitress. Scarlett, isn't it? I've heard so much about you." "You have?" Scarlett looked confused. "Oh yes. Peterson's told me all about his little hobby. Very sweet, really. Like a rich man playing at being poor." "Alice, stop," Peterson said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Stop what? Being honest?" Alice laughed, the sound like breaking crystal. "Scarlett, darling, surely you didn't think this was real? Men like Peterson don't end up with women like you. We marry within our own social circle. It's just how the world works." "Get out," Scarlett said quietly. "I'm sorry?" "Get out of my cafe, both of you. Just get out." Alice's smile widened. "Of course. Peterson, the car is waiting outside. We have a wedding to plan." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Scarlett, I do hope you've learned something valuable from this experience. Some dreams are meant to stay dreams." Alice swept out of the cafe, leaving Peterson and Scarlett staring at each other across a gulf that seemed impossible to cross. "Go," Scarlett whispered. "Just go. Scarlett, please. Go!" The word exploded from her like a gunshot. Peterson stood there for one more heartbeat, memorizing her face, then turned and walked out of the cafe. Behind him, he could hear Scarlett finally break down completely, her sobs echoing through the small space like a funeral dirge for everything they'd lost. As Peterson climbed into Alice's waiting sedan, he caught one last glimpse of Scarlett through the cafe window. She was sitting at their table, with her head in her hands, surrounded by the wreckage of the most beautiful lie ever told. "Well," Alice said as the car pulled away, "that was deliciously dramatic. I do hope you got it out of your system." Peterson said nothing. He couldn't speak past the boulder lodged in his throat. "Don't look so glum, darling. In 3 weeks, this will all be a distant memory. You'll thank me for saving you from making the biggest mistake of your life." As the cafe disappeared behind them, Peterson realized that Alice was wrong about one thing. He'd already made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd let the best thing that ever happened to him walk away, and in 3 weeks, he'd be married to the woman who'd orchestrated its destruction.